On the screen. Thank you. Welcome to the Fire Authority full meeting. And I would like to begin by welcoming all of you here today and any members of the public who wish to turn up and press, who are either here today or watching on live stream and on the Fire Services YouTube page. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Cathy Ray to her first meeting. Just a reminder that you probably already know that the Fire Authority allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and tweet during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place? Thank you. This meeting room has been arranged to comply with public health guidance on COVID safety. Committee members and officers will remove their face coverings at the start of the meeting and replace them at the end. This is to minimise the number of hand-to-face contacts. Could everyone please wear their face coverings when moving around the room and the building? A couple of housekeeping points in case anyone is unfamiliar with the building. The toilets are available in the corridor adjacent to this room, and I'll briefly adjourn the meeting after 2 hours if we have not concluded by that point for a comfort break. There's no fire alarm test scheduled today. So if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we'll make our way downstairs and out of the main entrance. The muster point is on the green opposite the main entrance. So first item, apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Dawn, can you report on any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Kevin Reynolds.
Thank you very much. And any declarations of interest? Sure. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I have to or not. I'm the local member to Papworth, so I don't know if I have to declare that. I will do anyway, but.
Thank you. That's noted, but I don't think it's.
Oh.
I don't think it's an interest that you need to declare. Any other declarations of interest? Sebastian.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if we are being issued with a dispensation by the monitoring officer in relation to proposed council tax.
May I have advice about that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, that's a standard item that I think we do each year, and all members will have that dispensation.
Thank you very much. Any others?
Madam Chair, if I can just come in,
Thank you.
Agenda item 11, we have Area Commander Simon Newton with us. He obviously has an interest in that item, so he will leave when that item is being discussed.
Thank you. Any other points? Thank you. We'll proceed to the first item, which is the minutes of the Fire Authority meeting on the 4th of November. We're being asked to approve the minutes as an accurate record. Does any committee member want to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes? I see no hands or objections, so we'll take that as carried unanimously. Thank you very much. On to Chair's announcements. I have circulated a note detailing various points about the great results for the HMI CFRS inspection, the encouraging news about the topping out ceremony in Huntingdon, and the LGBTQ plus activities planned for this month. I would also like to welcome formally Councillor Ray to her first Fire Authority meeting and place on record thanks to Councillor Hilary Cox-Condon for her service. I would also like to advise all members that I have today written to Lord Greenhalgh, the Minister for Building Safety and Fire, requesting a review of funding methodologies. We are as we all know, we are a very high performing but low funded fire authority, and the funding mechanisms in place today do not enable us to plan properly and effectively in the medium term. And I dare say there will be a number of points relating to that in the discussion to follow. So if I may move on now to the Councillor Kindersley.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair, but many members won't have had the opportunity to read that letter yet. I have, and I wonder whether it would be appropriate for the Fire Authority to write to all of our members of Parliament, copying that letter to them and making the point even more forcefully than is already made in the letter to Lord Greenhalgh, because without our MPs on board and fighting our corner, it's going to be a much steeper road to climb.
Thank you. So that's a proposal that this letter be sent to all local members of Parliament. Is that accepted? Thank you. I shall do so as soon as I possibly can. Thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Before we move on, Chairman, thank you. Could I just add also our congratulations to the Fire and Rescue Service for the exemplary result, as continues to show themselves as exemplary Fire and Rescue Service. Let's hope that people feel the same about the Fire Authority as well in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. So may we move to, please, unless there's any other comments or questions, may we move please to the first substantial item on the agenda, which is the budget and the medium-term plan. May I ask please Matthew Warren to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. This report has had a number of iterations since I first presented it to the Policy and Resources Committee in December. It went again through Policy and Resources again in January, and there was a number of comments that members made. So I wasn't intending on going through it in detail again, but just some key points really to draw out. The focus really from my perspective this afternoon is on the precept and obviously the council tax rise that's being recommended, which is 2% on a Band D property, takes it to £74.97, which is an additional £1.44 per year for the average Band D house within Cambridgeshire. The key focus for the next financial year really is around purely a carry forward budget with inflation applied. There's no significant investment within the service over and above that what we have at the moment. The key areas for us to consider really are around pay awards, which has been set at 2% within this budget. I think that will come under some pressure, and I've been very public with that already. Whilst fire services have received a pay award for the current financial year, I believe there will be some pressure of 2% or above for the future. Non-payers at 2%, and the other significant area for inflation is fuel, which has been set at 10%. But largely it's a carry forward budget. The focus is really very much on next year. There is a medium-term strategy that goes beyond that looks at that considers future investment. However, what I would say with that is until we are clear around what income sources we are going to achieve, that is very much and still will remain in drafts for the foreseeable future. And clearly, hopefully, we'll have some certainty this time next year when we've been through the comprehensive spending review and it's published. So I wasn't going to add any more. I'm happy to take any questions that the authority may have.
Comments or questions, Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you. It's a question. If we do not increase the council tax by 2%, it would be interesting to hear from Mr. Warren what that would mean. I mean, I'm assuming it would mean savings, and I would, or cuts rather, and I would be interested to know what that quantum would be and what it would equate to in terms of, for example, number of firefighters.
Thank you, Councillor Kindersley. Yes, a 2% increase in council tax equates to approximately £450,000. So we're looking realistically at between 10 and 12 firefighters if you look at it from an operational perspective, or probably 12 to 14 professional support members of staff.
Okay.
Councillor Over.
That one? Oh, yeah. Yeah, fairly obvious, isn't it, when you look at it? Okay, thank you. Just one or two bits. I've learned from experience over a couple of decades now, never, ever to have a standstill budget unless inflation is at 0%. We have suffered for years just for having 2 standstill years, and it's taken us decades to get back up to a position where we are, well, not even right, but getting fairly close to right. The second thing is with regards to Peterborough, 2% rise is fair enough, but we're not going to get too much income generation for that because only about 50% of the population in Peterborough actually pay council tax. So there's a considerable number who this is not going to affect and we're not going to get any money from. And the other thing I would be interested to find out how the population increase or the expected population increase is going to affect us, because we're in the hands of developers really. We're expecting in Peterborough another 10,000 houses to be built and occupied in the near future, but it would tend on the economy and builders about when they actually come. And so if we're basing our budget on increases in population, I'd just be interested to hear what we've got. And the last point is that with regards to 2%, it could be difficult to collect in some cases because the average wage in Peterborough is 50% that of Cambridge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So 3 questions, really. One is, how, as if I understand it properly, how can we spend more this coming year? How do we cope with the population increase? And what do we do about the fact that some of the council tax may be difficult to collect?
Shall I take in reverse order? So in terms of the council tax collection, certainly, interestingly, not including Peterborough at the moment, but certainly as a Cambridge, for the rest of Cambridgeshire, we're looking at a scheme that looks to maximise the amount of council tax that is collected. So we're looking at areas that perhaps people aren't paying that should be paying. And there's a project just being kicked off, and actually it's been led by the county council and districts. So we are part of that because clearly there's a vested interest in it for us. So certainly in terms of the majority of the county, notwithstanding Peterborough, we are putting conscious effort into trying to collect or maximise the collection rates across the Cambridgeshire area. So I think that's the first part. In terms of Peterborough, clearly we are dependent on our collecting authorities. So Peterborough Unitary, we are dependent on them to try and actually maximise the return that clearly we all get as a council tax precepting authority. So I think we can do a certain amount, and there's certainly investment being made. This authority is putting in a certain amount of investment, small amount for the return, hopefully, across the majority of Cambridgeshire. So I think that's the if I may, that's the first question. If there's anything further. Okay. In terms of you might have to remind me of the questions now, Councillor.
How can we spend more? What do we do about a population increase? And what
Okay.
do we do about council tax we can't collect?
So spending more is an extremely difficult one. We've been told by Lord Greenhage, interestingly, that actually we are capped at 2%. And again, one thing I didn't say in my introduction that's probably worth all members understanding is that if we'd have been in a lower quartile, as of yesterday, they amended the final local government settlement to say that actually those councils have £10 flexibility and not 5. So I think as it stands for next year, above the 2% is extremely difficult for this authority unless it chooses to go to a referendum. Now, what I'm saying is if inflation stays in and around 2%, we will be okay for next year. My concern comes in the years after that. And then in terms of maximisation, we long term, for the next financial year, we've got nearly approaching 2% increase in housing, which is great, notwithstanding your earlier point, Councillor Over, around the collection rates. Beyond that, we look to 1% growth each year in housing, which hopefully is prudent and there's on the side of caution, and it will exceed that. But again, your point around it's very dependent on developers and how quickly they can build the houses in and around the area. So hopefully that answered those questions.
Thank you very much. Comprehensive.
Just have a supplementary to that. I
Yes.
just want to underline the fact that I was saying that we should increase council tax in line with inflation, never go below it, else we're storing troubles in for it, and of course, never go above it. And Peterborough would have a problem with any increase over 2%, but 2% increase, happy with.
Thank you. Councillor Warren.
With the 10% increase in fuel, what capital spend or what programmes are looked at for alternative fuels to cap the fuel spend in the future?
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Well, hopefully you've in the papers today, there's a report on sustainability, and we're actually starting to look at alternative methods of fueling our vehicles. So one of the methods we're looking at, and we'll come on to it later, is around biofuels, biodiesels. One, they're cleaner, and two, we can perhaps start to have some control over the cost, because the more we buy, the less it costs us. So we are looking at alternatives where it makes financial sense, and I think that's part of the challenge that we have, because at the moment with some of these new technologies, there's a choice to make on when is the right time to buy. So at the moment we're looking at it, but I would say we're not quite there yet. So we are very much at the mercy of inflation on our current fuel sources.
Thank you. Councillor Bywater.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not going to start off with politics here, because you'll be glad to know that, you know, this has always been an apolitical sort of arena, and I'm going to keep it that way. This process, and I really want to say thank you to Matthew and Chris and John in particular, the process that we've been through, and also thank you for the information you've given me, because it's helped me understand where we are. You know, because our number one priority as a fire authority is to keep people safe in Cambridgeshire and ensure that they've got a fire service that responds when they need it at those moments when, God forbid, we get to those positions. I am going to support this budget today. I've had a long, hard talk to myself and others about it, but I want to just raise a couple of issues, really, just so it's on record. And I just want to talk about the non-pay inflation. We've had some briefings prior to this, and you set the limit to 2%. I want to put that on record that I am a little bit worried about that, like you probably are. Also, just general inflation, you know, because you know that is a substantial risk that we've got going forward. I was also pleased to hear in relation to the general reserves that you're going to revisit this later on in the year, because that does worry me. With the levels of reserves that we potentially got in years 2 and 3 in this MTFS. And also thanks for the responses. I raised this issue and concern at the policy meeting that we had last month about, you know, what those responses are. 113 is quite disappointing, but you know, we have this dilemma every year and we don't know the answers to it. If we did, we'd have lots more people responding, which would give us a better benchmark. But we have to look at what we've got, and that is 76% of people support the general increase in council tax. So just really wanted to get that on record, so members know my concerns going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those very constructive and helpful comments. And I'm sure that everyone shares the concerns about the medium-term plan. Is there anything that you would like to add to that?
Just to reiterate, yeah, there are risks around inflation. I think we keep saying it, and absolutely, it's something that we need to keep under significant scrutiny over the coming months. Absolutely.
And the point about reviewing reserves, I think that's a really important point. Thank you. They're really helpful. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. I think whoever watches this afterwards will also need to know the context and the pressure that we've been under for the last 10 years. So just if you can, and I'm not going to hold you to it, from when I came onto the authority to now, all I've ever known is that our budget's been cut. If we'd stayed in line with inflation, or how much of a difference would you say that we've lost in the last 10 years? And we're still you know, an excellent service. We've just had a good inspection, and you know, we've not cut frontline services. So in terms of how much, if you can put it in monetary terms, have we lost? And we're still, you know, fighting the good fight, as they say.
So it's not an exact science, because obviously I can take a budget in 2010, which was roughly, well, very roughly 30.22 million. And if you look at where we are today at 31.2 million, the inflationary pressure that's gone between would have probably amounted to around £7 million on top of that 30. And I know from a grant cut perspective, we've lost about 6. So all in all, around the £6 million mark is what our budget effectively has shrunk by over those years. And you as an authority have taken some really tough decisions along the way. You know, we know we've saved firefighters, and we know we've saved a lot of our support staff. And actually the quantum has shrunk over that period of time. So absolutely, that's the context that we find ourselves in. And we haven't ever complained. We've always got on with it. We've dealt with austerity, and I think we dealt with it in absolutely the right way. We've made ourselves more efficient. So it isn't all bad. There's been some positives that have come out of it as well. But now it comes back to the same point that Councillor Bywater was raising, and Councillor Jamil, really, we've got to a point now where actually we can't keep reducing the quantum.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chairman. I am really pleased to hear Councillor Bywater's support for the budget. I think the comments that he made are absolutely right, and I really welcome them. In terms of the way forward, speaking just with my hat on as chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I think it would be appropriate in future if the proposed budget was submitted to Overview and Scrutiny for Overview and Scrutiny. I didn't make a song and dance about it this year because with the pressures of COVID and people working from home and all the rest of it, it's just not that straightforward and probably not that appropriate. But I think that it would be a useful health check for the authorities' finances ongoing to have it come along. Obviously, the diary would have to be rejigged a little bit because clearly policy and resources need to actually agree it before it can be scrutinised, although not necessarily. I suppose you could do it the other way around. So anyway, perhaps that's something officers could take away with them. Councillor Bywater also made the comment in relation to the response to the public consultation. A note from the cost page that our postage for this financial year is £18,000, up £1,000 from last year. And that does seem a lot of money to be spending on postage. There's, I'm sure, very sensible things being posted out, they always are. But I would want to see a shift from paper and stamps, I'm afraid, to online and more interactive ways of particularly consulting. Whatever we might think about social media, it is possible to target residents of Cambridgeshire, not only geographically, but also using mosaic and other technology by age, by occupation, by social class, by income, all the rest of it. So that might be something to look into for our public consultation ongoing. So that all being said, I don't need any comment on it unless anybody's burning to say anything. I think I would propose or rather move the recommendation that we have in front of us for agenda item 4. Thank you, Chair.
Before we go on to the next comment or question, there were a couple of proposals that Councillor Kindersley mentioned. One was that officers would go away and consider how to have an overview or scrutiny process introduced into the budget making process. And one can imagine that there are aspects like the assumptions, you know, and so on that are key to building the budget. And also about, for example, moving from paper to electronic media, which may come more into the sustainability paper later. But in terms of the proposal to introduce scrutiny into the budget process, is that acceptable? Or Councillor Maguire, do you want to speak to that?
That's what I wanted to thank you, Chairman.
Thank
That's
you.
what I wanted. I just wanted to, in fact, support what Councillor Kindersley said, because, you know, on overview and scrutiny, we will scrutinise the audit and accounts, and we do that sense. But people sometimes forget the purpose of overview, and I think that was the point also that Councillor Kindersley was making. So I think it's appropriate, because we hear often, you know, the budget's gone through policy committee and they've discussed it, whereas the other half of the authority doesn't really have the opportunity until now, almost, apart from following that. So I would fully support that we ought to somehow program in and ask the officers to give consideration to the overview aspect of the overview and scrutiny. So not just to the budget, but anything that we ought to look at if we can and make comment accordingly. So I'd fully support Councillor Kindersley's point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And does everyone support that? Is that widespread support? Thank you. I think that's a really sensible proposal. If we could have some advice in due course about how we can program that in, that would be excellent. Are there any other comments or questions about the budget? No, in which case, let us move to the vote. We're asked to approve two things, and I will take them together. To approve the budget book attached at Appendix 1, including the recommendations detailed on page 22, and to approve the medium-term financial strategy as set out in Appendix 2, noting the concerns that have been expressed. Are members happy to support the recommendations? Agreed? Is that unanimous? Yeah. Yes. No objections? Thank you. Thank you very much. And let us move on to the next item, which is the draft pay policy statement. May I ask Matthew to introduce this, please?
Okay, so some of you been on the authority for a long time will remember that we came into some criticism. Hello, I'm back. There we go. Shall I start again? Okay. Right. So some of you that have been on the authority for a while will remember that so a number of years ago we attracted some criticism around our pay policy statement for it not being transparent enough. So we did a lot of work. We went away and effectively we revamped it and we followed best practice, and we present it to you every year, which is a legislative requirement. It's pretty much a roll forward. It highlights position, some key facts, particularly around some sort of pay terms and conditions, and the gap between the highest paid employee, which would obviously be the chief, and that of the lowest, and the median, and various other facts. So it's there as an information item. Principally, you do need to approve it, but the information in it is purely updated from one year to the next. And really, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments about this item? Councillor Kindersley.
Sorry, I'm being boring, aren't I? I have a quick question, which is in relation to the member-led review of pay policy, which I note took place in 2014. Is this something that needs to be refreshed perhaps in 2024, or is it already in the programme?
It isn't in the programme, but I think it would be a very good opportunity right now for us to think about reviewing it again. It makes sense, and let's just make sure we are still in line with best practice.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Then we'll look forward to the advice about how we can make that happen. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? In which case, thank you very much. we'll take that as approved. Next item is proposed changes to the Code of Conduct. Can I ask the monitoring officer, please, to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. So members, you have in front of you a paper that proposes that we move from our current Code of Conduct that applies to members to the LGA's model code. And I've set both our current and the model code in the papers. The model code you'll see is a little bit more detailed. It defines key terms which a lot of complaints center around respect, bullying, harassment. It specifically has a new specific section on social media communications and brings that in, given how prevalent that is as a means of communication in political issues. That's a welcome change. And it's a bit more granular in the detail that it gives. Our current code is very much based on the broad Nolan principles rather than any specifics in there. I've set out in the paper what other councils have done, and it's a mixed picture. Some councils who, like us, have got a very basic principles-based code have adopted it. Others who've had a more detailed code have chosen not to adopt it because their code is already detailed enough, and there's a broad spectrum of what's happened. But certainly my recommendation is that this is an improvement on what we currently have, because it provides members with specifics and some clarity for the communities that are served also. And for those reasons, I recommend its approval. Chair, if I can just make one correction to my report at 6.2, I have said, and I hope it hasn't sent alarm bells, that the new code includes a rebuttable presumption that you're acting in your official capacity. That's not quite correct. So you are still only ever acting in your capacity as a councillor, or you're acting in a private capacity when the code doesn't apply. There's a grey area, of course, of if you give a perception to a member of the public or somebody else that you are acting in your professional capacity, and we see a lot of that, particularly with social media. So just to say, it isn't assumed that you're always on duty unless proven otherwise. That distinction still does apply. So Chair, I'm very happy to take any questions about the detail in the code, but we did consider three alternatives: adopt it, amend our existing one, or do nothing and retain our existing one. Happy to take questions on that approach as well. And I think it's not in the recommendations, but what I'd like to do, if you do change the code and adopt this new one, to perhaps do some work at one of our seminars or workshops on what that means for fire authority members. I think it's difficult for fire authority members because you also have another code back at the ranch at your principal authorities, and there are some important differences between Peterborough, Cambridgeshire's code and the fire authorities code. So I'm happy to perhaps do some work on that to help clarify for members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Over.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment on that. I'm always disappointed that we need this kind of policy, but I guess we do. It was brought sharply into focus in my actual Conservative association in Northwest Cambs, where one member had to make a major complaint in one group meeting, a newly elected councillor aged about 23, 24, and she was saying that she was continually plagued with comments about her race, about her sex, and about her body. And so I guess we have to have this kind of thing, after all, as a major safeguard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Kindersley.
I have to start by saying what an unwelcome view into the workings of the Conservative Party in Northwest Cambridgeshire that was. I imagine there are cakes and champagne perhaps and things at these parties.
I can't afford champagne, so it's going to be Prosecco.
Thank you. The point I wanted to make was my inclination actually is that we adopt the model code for precisely the reason that was highlighted, which we are subject to, the principal authority codes, Cambridgeshire, Peterborough. Some of us are double hatters, so the various district authorities, and city and parish councils, town and parish councils, generally speaking, don't have a model don't have a code, but that moment one might assume is coming. So I'm a great believer in, if it is written by somebody else and agreed by lots of other people, the chances are it's more right than wrong. Although that belief is taking a bit of a hit just currently. But I do think on this occasion, the model code is the one to take forward. Again, might be something that overview and scrutiny could look at, not yet, but how it's operating, and maybe a year or a couple of years' time. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Councillor Maguire.
On a similar point, Chairman, I think looking at 5.3, and this was probably written beforehand, I think it's also right to say, and I'll look to one of my colleagues further down the table as a member of Huntingdonshire District Council, in which we sit at the moment, they too have also adopted the same policy. Just to add to that, and just to say, as fortunately, no matter what else happens in North West Cambs Association, at least they haven't brought ageism into a concern. So unfortunately, thank you.
They did.
Oh, did they?
It's too young. Yes.
Oh, I wasn't worried about the people who are too young. I was worried about the people who might be seen as too old.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Slatter, then Councillor Bywater.
Well, I want to thank Councillor Over for his honesty, because I'm afraid whatever group we belong to, we every now and then are shocked by what we thought were in our colleagues may say, and this empowers everybody to call them out, whoever they may be and wherever the remarks are coming from. Clearly, social media has made a difference. I've not Twittered, and I'm not sure that anything I hear about it makes me want to, but there clearly are some striking images going around, and they stick in people's minds. People do need to be able to defend themselves, and I think this will be very welcome to have this code of conduct. And yes, let's have the model one, because I think that Councillor Kindersley put it perfectly well. Let's not bother talking about the detail. We want to have it in place, I think.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, obviously in an ideal world, we wouldn't need this, but we don't live in an ideal world, I'm afraid to say. And yes, I don't do Twitter either. I came off it a long time ago. But really just a point of thanks really to Shaheen, because I know that she's put a lot of work into this. It is complex, but we do need it. And again, Sebastian, yes, we perhaps do need something to look at this, because it's all about interpretation sometimes. And if we can have a training program, then everybody's clear on what it actually is really. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jamil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with most of what's been said. I think this also acts as a protection for us as well, as councillors, because I think a lot of people come into this role not knowing exactly what you can and can't do, or they have misconceptions as to what councillor is able to do, what you can't do, and so on. And I think when you come in and you go through this document, it gives you a better idea, and may settle a lot of people. I think you need to look at it probably before you decide to stand for council or wherever. But I just think that this is there for our protection as well.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other questions or comments? I too would very much like to thank Shaheen for the work on this. It's quite complex, and it is for our protection as well as having a good model code. And let us vote on the adoption of the model code in its entirety, as that is what I've heard that people support. Is everyone in support of that? Yes. Does anyone object to it? No, thank you. That is carried. Thank you very much. Next item is members' allowance scheme for 22-23. Again, I'm assuming we all have the ability to speak about this matter. The report was circulated separately from the other papers. Could I ask Shaheen, please, to introduce it?
Thank you, Chair. So you will see that what is being proposed, and we have to do this every year, is to continue with the current allowance scheme. I have a second recommendation that I report back to you next time on options and costed options on what it would take to review this. Certainly last time I brought this paper, there was less of an appetite to do that, but things were very fluid, I think, then with the Fire Authority. But given that for a number of years, we have chosen to piggyback onto the County Council's independent review panel, it may be now, given how that has gone, that it's time to look very much Fire Authority focused in the roles of members on the Fire Authority, which are very different, I think, to those on your principal councils. So I'm not suggesting we do adopt an independent IRP, but I'll just bring back some options of what that looks like and how much it costs and whether we can piggyback onto somebody else or whatever those options might be. So this year, Chair, just to be clear, the proposal is that the current allowance scheme is simply rolled forward. But I think that does need looking at because we've done that for a number of years now.
Thank you. So essentially we have two proposals to consider. One is to approve the proposal to hold the allowances at the same level for next year as this year. And the other proposal is to look at options and come back with options and potentially mechanism for future years. So I invite comments and questions about those points. Councillor Slatter.
I certainly think we should hold the allowances, which are not ungenerous as they are. We are asking our constituents to pay more for everything else, and it would be hard to justify, I think, that we would be valued for any more money. And so I'm very happy to keep it a level. Hopefully any councillors that are in particular need, groups will flag that up confidentially, and we'll make sure that nobody suffers from this.
Thank you. So all those in support, please raise your hand. Of both proposals? Thank you. Any objections? No, thank you very much. So our next item is to consider a draft sustainability strategy. Matthew.
Thank you. Okay, so the service and the authority, we've been working for a number of years looking at sustainable solutions when it comes to our buildings, particularly our properties. We've looked at, obviously, when we build new ones, they are of a BREEAM very good standard. Our fleet, we have all of our I'll call them all of our appliances are Euro 6, so the cleanest you can get when it becomes a diesel engine. And we've moved all of our fleet cars to petrol from diesel over the last few years. We need to be a little bit more ambitious, albeit considered ambition, because clearly some of the sustainable solutions moving forward can be quite expensive as well. So I've put a draft strategy together. We've done some work, we've done some consultation. For those of you that know Anglian Water, not far away from us here, they're pretty much a leader when it comes to sustainability, and we've been working with them in terms of understanding how they go about things. Not that we can compete, but we can certainly take some of their ideas, I'm sure, and apply to ourselves. So we've got a number of themes that we're looking at. Clearly, it's ambitious, 2030 to get to net zero. Ambitious target. I'm not sitting here now saying we'll definitely meet it, because it will depend on cost, because we've had the conversations before. But nevertheless, unless we set ourselves a challenging, if you like, target, I'm not sure we'll move anywhere. So the principles are, the themes are people. Really around us changing behaviours, because we do have some behavioural, should we say, challenges when it comes to sustainability. You know, I go onto an on-call fire station and the technology isn't there, but the heating is definitely on. and it's warming the fire appliance. So we do need to change people's attitudes towards certain things. Transport, the whole thing around transport is around actually how to make ourselves more sustainable. Journeys, people coming into the office, new ways of working like this. Our fleet, biodiesel, electric vehicles. It's a huge if you like, task for us, but we need to start planning ahead, because the future does look as though it's going to be greener. So we need to be engaging with that. Property, we continue to improve our property. Clearly, we know that particularly our headquarters is an extremely challenging building to make it sustainable, but nevertheless, we need to think about. So without going into detail on everything, there's things we can do. We need to go away. I think we need to plan it in detail. We're going to take some advice from the Carbon Trust. And hopefully I'm looking to bring back a detailed plan probably by the end of the year, which actually starts to set out some of the challenges and some of the direction we would like to take as an authority, and hopefully you can hold us to it in time.
Thank you. That's a great step forward. Councillor Slatter.
Thank you, Chair. Small point, I'm sorry if I missed it in your report. Electric vehicles for our staff. Now, obviously, we're not in a budget position to give them loans to buy new cars or anything like that, but obviously charging points are, I would hope now, a given. You know, you're nodding, that's great. It even makes me wonder whether we can be good neighbours and provide some public ones. Now, there's probably some problems with that. But if you're looking into it, I would like to see, I'm not familiar with all your buildings, but there may be some that would be just the thing for somebody in the road wanting to go over to electric, but not being able to do it in their own home, because a lot of people's homes are unsuitable, or they start tripping up the neighbours as they go by. Thank you.
Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chair. I too welcome the sustainability strategy as a first step. And in particular, I note that this, of course, the initial focus will be on us understanding where we are currently. Where we are currently, from my perspective, I think, is that the service is a highly respected part of the community across a wide geographical area. So I would very much hope that the sustainability strategy right from the start will see us as being agents of change. Now, two things immediately jumped out at me. In the medium-term financial strategy, there is 5 years worth of equipment upgrade. So I would be expecting that the people supplying that equipment can demonstrate their own sustainability strategies to show their ambitions for carbon neutrality. So that is something, you know, that I would immediately look to seeing. I also know that as a service, we go into, you know, people's homes to say, you know, that's probably not the best place to have your curtains hanging over an open fireplace, or whatever it happens to be. But that is an opportunity as well to actually say to people, you know, it's very hot in here and you've got your windows open. Have you thought about applying for something to deliver something else from an authority, obviously not necessarily the fire and rescue service. So that's what I mean about being agents of change. And I think that if we don't get that going right from the start, it's a waste of time and everybody's energy to have to kind of retrofit that when we say to people doing those inspections, for example, okay, after 2 years of our sustainability strategy, we're going to send you on a training course to learn how to do that. You know, let's have that all ready to go right from the start. And the great advantage of the fire and rescue service being highly respected is that the things that we or officers say to people and to communities and to residents and to schools and to all the rest of it carry much more weight than perhaps some other organizations that spring to mind. And so we have a real advantage. So let's use that advantage to make sure that not only is our own sustainability strategy a really, really, you know, an exemplar one, but that we are also influencing a wide range of other sustainability strategies to help them to be the best that they can possibly be.
Thank you. Some really interesting thoughts there for consideration. Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, Chair, I haven't got my earphones in, I can't hear. Just wondering whether we thought about grants. Have we looked at applying for grants? Are there any available within this process?
Matthew, would you like to take this?
Thank you. Okay, so if I could, I've actually written a number of points down. So Councillor Slatter around the electrical points. Yes, we are starting to roll out charging points across the organisation at all of our stations. We're doing it at our strategic sites first, and the focus clearly will be on our own fleet initially, but with a view for the actual technology we're putting in means that people can register, because our own people want to charge their vehicles as well. They can register and we can effectively recharge them for the electricity they use. So that technology already exists, and we are starting to roll that out across the service. That links to Councillor Taylor's point around grants, because a lot of the charging points we're putting in are actually grant funded. So we're looking to apply for grants as much as we can along the way as well. We did apply for some significant funding last year, but it was oversubscribed by all other local authorities, so we were unsuccessful. But nevertheless, I'm sure there'll be other options as we move forward, which we're keeping a close eye on. And Councillor Kindersley's points around procurement sustainability, absolutely, because if our suppliers aren't operating in a sustainable way, we're never going to get there. So that's a flavour. We are working or will be working really hard, and we're trying to bring people together to ensure that actually we start to make a real difference. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other points? Thank you very much. That's a really, really important start, and we look forward to seeing the plan in due course. Thank you very much. So next we have John Anderson, please, to give us an update on the relocation of the Papworth fire station.
Thank you, Chair. Eric Martin, Simon Newton's going to lead a presentation on this, but we'll both be available to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. Members, it's just an opportunity for us to update you on the work that is underway and will be continuing over the next couple of months as we consider the latest iteration in our capital development programme around moving Papworth Fire Station to the Cambourne area. For those of you that have been on the authority for a while will realise we've made some fantastic developments in terms of our sites to ensure that they're as fit for purpose as they can possibly be, and they reflect the risk that we're trying to manage within our communities. One of the probably most comparable would have been back when we moved our Swaffham Bulbeck fire station to Burwell, and we built a brand new fire station in Burwell, and we moved a station and combined the two together. The move of our Papworth and Cambourne is not quite as significant as that, because we're not closing a station, we're simply moving it from one location to another. The work around this has been is a decade in the making. So for those of you that remember when the Cambourne Township started, we were offered an opportunity via 106 to develop a fire station in that area, which we took. But we were really clear, the Chief Fire Officer, Graham Stagg, was really clear at that time, the risk still sat with much more closely to where our Papworth station was. Over time, we've seen significant risk change. Papworth Hospital, even back then, was being discussed about moving over to the Addenbrooke site. That now has been done, and we find ourselves in a position where the time is right to undertake the move and relocate our fire engine from Papworth into the Cambourne area. And in the paper, there's obviously some significant areas where we think will offer some significant improvements to the communities in those areas, and meet some more of our strategic objectives in terms of our operational excellence, responding to emergencies much more quickly, in terms of our people, giving the staff on those stations some really excellent training facilities that they can use. And in terms of community and sustainability of that station, Cambourne does offer a much more sustainable pool of people from which we can draw on-call members of staff And we hope that station will have a really bright future in that area. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you might have, but I hope that gives you an overview. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I think everybody's waiting for me. Basically, or I'm quite happy to wait for questions to see what you all think. Right, basically, taking on board what you just said, I don't really think this is going to be a problem with anybody. So I hope everybody can agree with this little amendment I have. It's just basically, I would like to propose that we defer this item to a further agenda item, i.e. it comes back. So as there can be a full consultation, because there hasn't been, a full consultation with all stakeholders, and we can see a full business case. I understand the history, I'm aware of it, but a lot has happened and there's a lot of stakeholders, parish council, community, who do need to be more informed or informed and put into the pot. So I would like to propose that it comes back to this fire authority, with a full consultation and a further business case. That's my proposal.
Thank you. May I ask initially what consultation or information provision there has been so far?
I'm happy to take that, Chair, if you want. We're just starting the consultation process, and I tend to agree with Councillor Smith. Once we've done that full consultation with all the stakeholders, I think it is appropriate to bring it back to Fire Authority to update and give the feedback we've received from those consultations.
Councillor Kindersley first.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this, but as Councillor Smith has lobbed a grenade into the middle of the chamber, I'm going to. First of all, it did make me chuckle the way it was described that this was offered to the service. The service asked for it, I think, back in the Section 106 negotiations, and was not going to take no for an answer. I think it subsequently turned out quite rightly. I have a certain amount of sympathy for Councillor Smith in that we don't have in front of us, for example, the views of Papworth Parish Council or Camborne Town Council or residents. But that's not our business. This is an operational matter. And if the organisation says, if the service part of the organisation says, this is something that we need to do, and we have had a plan to do it for X number of years, and the time has now come to do it, I don't think it's our business as Fire Authority members to say, actually, can we hold this up for a bit whilst we do something else or consult or go into other matters, because it's operational. And so from that perspective, Camborne knew it was coming. Papworth knew it was going right back in the day because it was part of the Section 106 agreement. And, I don't see any reason at all to support holding it up. Very happy, obviously, to have reports come back to the Fire Authority to say how things are getting on in just the same way we do in all of the other parts of the business of the service, but not to slow it up for a public consultation when our professional officers are telling us what it is that they need to do. Sorry, Mandy.
Thank you. I appreciate there are other people who want to speak about this, but if I could just bring us back to what we are being asked to consider today. We are being asked to note an update, and included in the report is the fact that there is consultation underway and that the consultation will be further reported to us in due course. So if I could introduce that. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd indicated it. I thought you picked it up because first of all, I wanted to second the proposal made by Councillor Smith. I was here when the decision was made to more, as I think Kinsley said, that we asked for the Section 106 agreement. It's back in 2010, I think the officers will remind me when we first started this move. Where I disagree fundamentally with what Councillor Kindersley is saying is he talks about it operational. I think it's worth reminding ourselves, although the police authority has changed to we now have a police commissioner, the difference between the police and the fire authority is the police authority or the police commissioner is not responsible for operational matters. In the case of the fire authority, we are responsible for operational matters. So operational things come under the fire authority as well as under the chief fire officer. So I think it's not unreasonable that we consider operational moves such as this. I think it's also worth reflecting that, as I said, it was 2010, if my memory serves me right, that we first considered and talked about this and proposed the precedent for the Section 106 agreement, and Campbell was eventually built. But that was 12 years ago. And as it's mentioned in 4.8, and the officers have brought this to us, right in the middle of that paragraph, it says the need to clearly communicate the rationale for this change and the benefits it will deliver is vitally important. That is true not just to staff, but it's also true to the community. So I don't think it's unreasonable that we actually have something come back following that consultation, which I think everybody agrees is right that we do that. And then I think I make the assumption is that we agree to continue with the programme, that's probably what's going to come to us, to agree with the programme that was agreed way back many years ago. So, Chairman, in that I would hope that the Fire Authority will support Councillor Smith's recommendation that following the engagement and the consultation that something comes back to this authority for consideration. I don't think anything much will change, but it may. We just don't know. So as I say, 12 years have passed. A lot of things have happened in that area. I'd like an update on it from both. And as I say, I'm assuming the consultation covers both Camborne and Papworth, if not wider afield. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So if I could be clearer that the proposal is for an update about the consultation, I think there's absolutely no problem with that whatsoever, because that is anticipated.
I agree. That's
anyway.
all basically. I just want to, if I can.
But there's no proposal to revisit the decision.
It's basically, I just want to make sure that my residents are consulted with, and neighbouring people as well, because other stations might basically think, what about us? I won't mention the detailed draft medium-term capital programme we just sort of waved through or agreed to. That Papworth station basically in 23-24 it's down that there's going to be refurbishment and welfare facilities. So I'd like us to be a bit consistent, and I would like residents consulted with.
There's no suggestion that they're not being consulted with.
Well, they're not yet. That's all I'm just trying to get to.
The update is that they are being consulted with, and I think we're very happy for that information to come back.
Chairman,
Councillor Maguire.
Almost on a point of order. I just want to come back to something you said, that there's no intention to revisit the decision. Clearly, if you're going to go out and consult and engage, something may come out of that makes us, the authority, rethink that decision. So I wouldn't make that presumption. I think it very unlikely personally that anything will come out that would make us. But I just wanted to qualify, there's no guarantee that something couldn't come out that might not make us wish to revisit and question the decision. So I just want to clarify, because you did say that. I just want to be clear that that may not be the case. There's no point.
Well, I'm being clear about what we're doing today. And I've got two officers who would like to speak.
I think we need to be clearer in terms of the communication we're going to be having with the parish council at Papworth and at Camborne. The communication will be that actually we are intending on moving the station, and actually it's an information giving event. Like Simon has already alluded to, the risk has changed significantly, which we anticipated. And Councillor Maguire, you've already highlighted that probably nothing's going to change. Well, it's the high level risk was Papworth Hospital. Papworth Hospital is no longer in Papworth. And actually the reality of the situation we find ourselves in is that we are now struggling to crew Papworth Fire Station. The point Councillor Smith raises around the station refurb, absolutely. Well, if the risk hadn't changed, and that's why it's been in there from a medium-term perspective, then clearly we would have to refurbish that station, because we've invested nothing in that station for a number of years, knowing that at some point the risk transfer was going to be to Camborne. I think where we're at right now is that from an operational perspective, we have an operational crew that's largely based at Papworth that comes in from Camborne. So the operational risk is there right now as an organisation, where we are having a delayed turnout because actually the predominant number of people are coming from Camborne. So we need to be very clear, I think, as an authority, that actually right now we're sitting on risk. We are going to be informing the public of that risk, and actually the service they're going to be getting as we move forward will be a more resilient one, because Camborne, there's a much larger population base, or will be a much larger population base in the future. So I think it's just for clarity, we need to be clear where we are at this particular time.
Thank you. Is there anything you wish to add?
Yeah, thank you. I would not want to enter into anything where our communities thought there was going to be a change of our intention. We've clearly highlighted the risk demand has changed in that area, and the data supports that we're likely to be able to respond to our most serious incidents more quickly at the new station in Camborne than we are in Papworth. For us, that's a risk that we've been accepting to a time where we were able to make the move, and we think that time's now. So what I wouldn't want to do is go out to communities and give them the impression that we would stay at Papworth. That for us is not an acceptable option. But what we do recognise, and I think just in terms of due process, was that we needed to come and explain to you where we were with this piece of work. We've already started engaging with our workforce and made it really clear what the plans are for them. We've got the staff at those stations really well engaged, and we've already made contact with the parish councils about going to those next meetings and explaining to them the rationale. There's going to be letter drops across both those communities, and we will do social media platform events as well, so that people are really well engaged and understood. But I wouldn't want people to think they've got a choice of saying no, and then we might say, okay, we stay at Papworth. So that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jamil, then Kindersley.
Thank you. I was really good at say what you just said, because a decision has been made. Now, I wouldn't want to go back to and give people the idea that, things may change, because, £1 million of money has been spent. There's a station sitting and we're ready to go. And a consultation, I think, whilst if we'd done this in 2010, which I'm sure, you may or may not have done, now we're just saying this is going to happen. And now any consultation may give the wrong idea to people that, we can keep Papworth going. And that for me would be actually worse than anything else. And I think, whilst I understand what you're trying to say and what you're trying to do, but I think this was going to happen. And I think we've put it off for such a long time. It's probably the reason why we're having this conversation now, and now we're ready. And I think if we go back and people say, no, we want to keep it open, what do we do then? It's just going to cause us more problems.
Thank you, Councillor Kindersley.
Thank you, Chairman. We are talking about a consultation when we should in fact be talking about an information programme. Consultation has very specific legal meanings, and you cannot go to a community as part of a consultation if there isn't an option. And that is effectively what Councillor Smith has proposed. And she's asked that we defer making a decision on this item. This is a project which is looking for completion in April. I would ask her to withdraw her proposal, and I think perhaps a more constructive way forward would be to have a report at our next meeting of the public information programme that was undertaken by the service in relation to the move of the fire station from Papworth to Camborne, because it is against principles of natural justice to go out to consultation and not give people not only all of the information, as we discovered with the East West Rail, but also valid, informed options, because otherwise they cannot make valid, informed comment. And you will be aware, Chairman, no doubt, of the Aarhus Convention, to which the United Kingdom is still signed up, which requires us to get consultation processes right. So I would ask again that Councillor Smith withdraw or amend her proposal so that it reads as along the lines of, at the next meeting of the Fire Authority, we receive a report on the information programme that was undertaken by the service in relation to the move of Papworth Fire Station to Camborne. Thank you, Chair.
Clearly, I don't know about withdrawal.
Thank you.
But I can understand where you're coming from. I do think the parish council and everybody should have been spoken to before this. As far as I'm aware, they haven't been. I had a phone call from somebody the other day, which was very welcome at a bad time. I understand what you're saying, but they need to be fully informed. All right, maybe the information bit is the right way to go. Maybe that's it. But there is more. We need more meat on the bones as well. We need a business case, like what will happen to the site afterwards, for example. You know, that's operational. We have to know what's going on. So there's more information to go in the pot, I think, you know. So yes, more information needs to come back here, but the communities need to be aware of what is happening, which I don't think they have been made aware of so far.
Thank you, Councillor Bywater.
Gosh, thank you. I'm getting a little bit confused by this. Yeah, look, I guess it's you know, this has been happening for ages. It's no shock. You talk about hand grenades, but you know, this is no shock. We've been on this journey for a while. I guess you know, is about people locally feeling that they've been spoken to, and it appears from Simon that this is going to happen. I guess it's just how it's presented back here, so that we're informed about the process that's taking place. Mine are really particularly questions for you, Simon. We talk in the report, it talks about, you know, I think there's 4 officers at Papworth, 4 at Camborne. Given that we have a big issue about our retained fire staff, what evidence have you got to say, you know, because you talked about Camborne being probably a better draw for staff where we're going forward. What evidence have you got to support that claim? You know, where can we see that? Because, you know, saying just because you're going to Camborne, you're going to get more staff, there's no guarantee about that. So I'd just like to understand that as well. And then just also, Mandy talks about the values, land values and stuff like that. You know, what is the value of Papworth once it's sold? You know, what's the capital receipts that we're going to get from that? You know, that's not clear to me in this report. So that also has to come back here, I think. So we, as members, understand, you know, there might be some good news stories behind this, and, you know, we should hear that. So thank you if you could ask those questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much. There's been quite a bit of discussion, including about a proposal to bring information back to this committee, which is what has been proposed in the report anyway, and a programme of information in relation to the local communities, which, you know, is in train anyway, as officers have described. So clearly this is something that can come back. The information, the report about the information programme can come back to this committee. I know that Chris Strickland is online and wishes to speak to this point, if we can sort of sort the technology out.
Good afternoon, members. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I think it's already been said, actually. I think my nervousness was around the term consultation, and I think Councillor Kindersley sums it up very well. This is a decision that was made some time ago, and I think we do need to explain ourselves to our local communities. We are moving towards the point where we do need to shift our resource from Papworth to Camborne, and the point that's raised by Councillor Bywater is very important. We know that there are more people living in Camborne, so therefore the likelihood is we will be able to recruit more people from Camborne. That's not a given, and there never is, and we all know that there are ongoing issues around recruiting and more specifically retaining. From an operational perspective, and that's the whole thrust of our decision, Camborne is a better place for us to have an appliance. So if we can get to that site, we can crew it, then I think we can provide a better service for Cambridgeshire as a whole. And the questions, I guess, around the Papworth site, those are things that we would want to bring back to members to explain what the situation is and what our preferred route for disposal will be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there any other points anyone wishes to make? Yes, please.
Apologies, it is just a point reference to really important information raised by Councillor Bywater. There is a bibliography on the report, and I'm hoping you're able to access that. It's a SharePoint link from an internal report that was presented. I mentioned it was presented to our COAG group, our Chief Officer Advisory Group, where the decision was made, and on there is all the information about the population across the 2 wards and where we're likely to see the significant increase or not. So at least in terms of that one point, I hope you're able to satisfy and assure yourself of that. We'll absolutely, of course, bring that back in the next report too.
Thank you. I have Councillor Smith. Anyone else?
Thank you. I don't apologise for throwing the grenade in, although I don't think it was a grenade. I will say, though, through debate, I think we've all come to a bit of a happy medium, which I think you'll be pleased about, Chair, that it's going to come back. We're going to find out more what's happening. My residents are going to be consulted with. Not all right. Information, I apologise, they're going to be spoken to more than they have been. And we will know more what's going on out in the community and explain. And if people have genuine concerns, we will explain X, Y, Z to them. So I do not apologise for the grenade, but through conversation and debate, I think we've got there.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think that's a really excellent discussion, and we have reached a common view. So we do note the contents of the report and the work that's being done to provide information with staff and communities that will be affected by the move. And we've all had various points that have been made about the report. So thank you very much. Is everyone in agreement with that? Yes, and noting that information will come back to this committee about this matter. Thank you. Thank you. So on to the next item, a fire safety legislation update. Please, can I ask an officer to introduce the report? Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, members. This report is really to update you on new fire safety legislation that is due in April this year, but more importantly, that is due in April 2023 when it gains royal assent, and hopefully June 2023 when it comes into force. So sadly, out the back of Grenfell Tower, the inquiry has taken place and has updated the Fire Safety Act and the Fire Safety Order, which has put more pressure on our fire protection teams to make sure that our tall buildings in our county are fit for purpose and safe for people to live and work in. And that work's been completed on time, in fact 6 months early, by our fire protection teams, which was great work. And now they start to work to build capacity and capability as we move forward to the Building Safety Bill that is due to gain royal assent in April 2023. This bill will probably place a lot more pressure on our fire protection teams, hence the reason the National Fire Chiefs Council preparing the appendix that is to the report that hopefully you've had a chance to read, that was shared with all fire authorities across the country to give them some oversight on what is likely to be coming in the future. I think it's worth noting that money will play a part in it, and we make reference to that in the report around the sort of economic impact to the organisation. It's the building safety regulator that's likely to see a big draw on our resource. We've got some very skilled and qualified members of staff in our fire protection team. And we are a county that have currently got 20 buildings that are of 18 metres or 7 floors and above, which is quite a small proportion compared to our neighbouring counties. So there's a likelihood that those resources will be called upon from a regional perspective and also pulled into the building safety regulator. At present, it is likely that we won't have any control over that. The health and safety executive who will oversee the building safety regulator will require us to form part of that. And at the minute, the costings will probably not recoup the cost of sending those people into that regulator, and therefore the impact on us to deliver our business as usual. Hence the reason at the minute we are using a government grant of £186,000 to build capacity and capability within that fire protection team. It's not in the report, I do apologise, but as of yesterday, I was informed by our head of fire protection that further grant of approximately that sort of money will be available for us for the year 2022-23. But again, that's a one-off grant. So in terms of building that capability and capacity, it can't be guaranteed and factors into our establishment figures because it's a one-off fund. I think in terms of moving forward, we'll continue using that fund to grow our workforce and make sure that we have got the right trained staff. They get exposed to the right areas to make ourselves ready for when this building safety bill comes in. I appreciate it's unknown territory at the minute, and we are taking it step by step as we gain information about what it looks like. But I think it's important that members are aware that it will have potentially a 30% increase on our workload within that department, of which it is a very lean department at present. And we will do our best to find different ways in how we can make sure our buildings across the county are safe from fire and allow people to live and work in them as they need to.
Thank you very much indeed for that report. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Kindersley.
A couple of a comment and a question. So first of all, the discussion of regional hubs, which I'm quite surprised to see. I'd have thought anybody connected with fire would run a mile from the idea of a regional hub after what happened with Waterbeach. But anyway, moving that on to the question I wanted to ask, which is this: if we have only 20 buildings that are in scope and our neighbouring authorities have several hundred, for argument's sake, we'll be using this 186,000 this year and again next year to train up our people to do the work. Is there then going to be a requirement, or worse, an obligation for us to say to our trained teams, unfortunately, you are being made to go and look at buildings in Hertfordshire or Northamptonshire or Essex?
Thank you for your question. Yeah. So in terms of I think in terms of your first question, the regional hubs, that's trying to build capacity within our highly trained staff, of which there are very limited. And I think it's fair to say that unfortunately the private sector are taking our very well trained staff for their own purposes, probably which is a shame. But unfortunately, trying to maintain their development is difficult. And yes, we will use that money to do that. There is a slight issue in terms of the law. So at the minute, no, we can't send our assessors to go and enforce in other counties. But that is something that the bill will probably look to allow us to do. So there is the potential that, yes, we could use our resource from a collaborative perspective to go and support the likes of Hertfordshire and Essex that probably have got a greater range. What should be noted is that also in the building safety bill, the likelihood is that 11 to 18 metre tall buildings will fall into scope. So that will grow the amount of buildings that we will need to go and regulate.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. We're asked to note the information in that and the associated risks and issues noted and discussed. Thank you very much. For the next item, the re-engagement of Area Commander Newton. Thank you. So who will introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so Area Commander Newton Simon is due to retire in the not too distant future, and as some of you will be aware, we've had a significant amount of turnover in our middle and senior levels across the organisation over the last few years. We've lost a number of people that have gone on to other organisations, and whilst we've had a focus, probably why many of them have moved on, we've had a focus on developing from within, trying to manage that succession, understanding when people hopefully when they will leave the organisation, hopefully. However, because of that additional attrition that we've experienced, what we're asking for here is for Simon to be re-engaged. He will leave the service for a month and a day, and then come back. He'll come back in his existing position as an area commander, operating the operational rota as well. So nothing will change from that perspective. The rationale is that we have Area Commander Smith is sat down there, so I'm sure he won't mind me saying it, but we've got a relatively new area command team with Stuart and Wayne, and we really need some continuity of service for a couple of years, just to give us the opportunity to bring those people that are currently operating at group commander level particularly, and maybe at station command, the opportunity to develop so they can actually hit the ground running, and we don't lose the continuity of service that we have built up, which is, I think, a mark of our success in terms of things like HMI. It's because we've had a relatively stable team for the last number of years, and we want to keep that if possible. So it's very much a 2-year process. We are working really hard in the background. We've got a talent management system that we are implementing to actually ensure that when we get 2 years down the line, we won't be coming back to you to say the same thing. We'll be saying, absolutely, we're ready now. And the likes of Simon can then ride off into the sunset.
Thank you very much. And I think it's worth noting that there has been a rigorous process involved in this. And of course, this is a transparent process that we're engaging in today. Are there any other comments? Councillor Maguire.
It's less a comment, Chair, but more to do a question. As is been said already, and I think it was mentioned at the seminar this morning, and we know that Cambridgeshire has got a proud history of being able to support people who've moved further on into other services, and it's true that we've also benefited where other services people have moved in and become chief fire officers, in particular here, and long may it continue, and that's part of the progression within the services, and we're proud to see it happen. So, and in supporting this particular thing, but I just wanted to get an update, whether from Matthew or from John, who could tell us. There was a point at some stage where we had a bit of a bubble because we had a massive move towards people leaving the service because they'd already reached pensionable age, and that followed, for those who weren't here at the time, the fact that there was a massive big recruitment. It was in the 70s, I think. So we had a big recruitment, and of course everybody joined at that time, which meant that many people were leaving at that time. I presume we've got over that peak now, and in general, it's a more stable situation than it was a few years ago, where everybody was leaving the service generally right across the country. Is that true?
Councillor Maguire, yes, absolutely. We're at the tail end of that peak, and I think that's been part of the challenge, actually, because whilst other services have also lost people at the same time, that's where our people have moved and taken the opportunities that it's created. So yes, we're at the tail end. It now starts to diminish quite significantly, and our turnover hopefully starts to stabilise from a pension perspective, at least.
Right, so is everyone happy with this recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And now on to the next item, the results of consultation with representative bodies. This is a follow-on of changes to the disciplinary policy and procedure.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, you'll remember at your November meeting, you considered the constitutional documents and terms of reference that were changed. One aspect of those was the role of the fire authority. You currently hear appeals against dismissals, and the proposal was to move that to the Chief Fire Officer's team. That was an item that needed to be consulted on with the rep bodies, and this report simply reports back that consultation. You'll see at paragraph 5.5 quite a few comments in from the FBU. the other rep body that did respond was Unison. Unison are happy with the proposals. I've tried to précis there the main concerns and our responses, and other services responses. And plainly, it's right that the FBU does have some concerns about the change. But my advice is that the recommendation still is good, that there is good reason to move this. The perception, I think, of the FBU is that you as members bring that level of independence, which can't be done by the fire service itself. That isn't how it works in other employers, including big and small public sector bodies like this. The proposal is that any dismissals are only heard by the chief officer group. That keeps that decision making within the service with all the knowledge and the complexities of the service, but sufficiently distanced from the decision to bring that objectivity. And of course, any decisions that the chief officers make subject to scrutiny and an employment tribunal if they get it wrong. So noting all the comments, it still remains my recommendation that the proposal is correct and remains good, but happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you. Any questions? Seem to have run out of questions. Thank you very much. And so that we've been asked to note the outcome of the consultation process. The only other matter is just some small changes that have been necessitated by having a new councillor on the team. So can I hand over to Dawn, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is just to flag up. It's some appointments to committees. As Councillor Cox-Condren's no longer on the Fire Authority, we have Councillor Ray, and it's just a like-for-like swap. So Councillor Ray is being appointed to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and also the Fire Authority Discipline Committee. We also took this opportunity because, as you know, there have been quite a few constitutional changes. One of those is to reduce the membership size of the Joint Consultative Committee. That impacts on the Conservative group, and I've been in touch with Councillor Reynolds as he needs to take 2 members off that, and he said he'll get back to me on that once he's consulted with his group. So my proposal is for the Fire Authority to note Councillor Ray's appointments to those 2 committees, and also note that there'll be some deletions from the JCC, and I'll append those changes to the minutes and when they're published.
Thank you very much. Everyone happy with that? Councillor Kindersley.
Yes, very happy to say yes to that. Can I make a tiny little suggestion? And that is that I would be very grateful if we could focus on using gender neutral language in our reports. It made me laugh a lot in the last report when it talked about not wanting to overturn the decision of one of his senior managers, and then went on to say they'd be fully able to make informed and evidence-based judgments without bias. So it's a small thing, but it's really important. So, and it takes time and practice too, I appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. Yes, it is important. Thank you very much. And with that, that is the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for attending.